programs of late have been kind of a combination of myth-busting and rant, and one of the things I like to start with is my favorite definition of economics. It is the science of explaining tomorrow why the predictions you made yesterday didn't come true today. This is why we are grateful for meteorologists, because they are worse at this than we are. So I particularly enjoy speaking to groups that have problems with short-term memory. So if I come back later, you're like, I didn't say that. So we will talk a little bit about what to expect. We're also going to talk a little bit about some of the things that kind of permeate the media during an election year. You may have noticed we're in an election year. One of the most interesting statistics about the election year: sales of TiVos and DVRs skyrocket during election years. It is the only conceivable way to avoid these people. So it is been good for that part of the industry anyway. This is kind of the media depiction of the U.S. economy. It's kind of like, the good news is we may have hit bottom. There's some truth to this, but honestly, it's kind of overblown. And there's things that become truisms, I guess, about the U.S. economy that really aren't true. And as mentioned in the intro, I do a lot of work with manufacturers. And this is probably one of the most myth-laden sectors of the U.S. economy. There is an assumption, it's been going on for years, that we no longer make anything, that we are a country that doesn't make products, we don't have manufacturing anymore, we don't have industrial production, it all comes from China, and all we do is push paper and spend on things made elsewhere. That's not true. The U.S. accounts for 40% of global manufacturing by value. China accounts for 10%. We are 4 times larger than China as a manufacturing nation by value. China makes the junk we buy in Walmart. We make the machines the Chinese use to make the junk that make in Walmart. We make airplanes. We make road building equipment. We make sophisticated products. We're one of the world's leading manufacturing nations. The only country that comes close to us is Germany. They're the other 40%. And then the rest of the world divides up that 20%. So we continue to be a powerful manufacturing nation. 1 out of every 7 jobs in the United States is dependent on manufacturing or is in manufacturing. You are constantly seeing references to how few people are in manufacturing, but that is an accident of how it's counted. So you're not counted as a manufacturer unless you're actually standing behind a machine. Like the other 600 people that are in the company don't count. Like, what's the payroll clerk going to do if you don't have people making something with the machine? All those people are employed by manufacturers. The sector alone, if you pulled it out of the U.S. economy, would be the 8th largest economy in the world. So it is a huge part of the United States. Other myths that sort of permeate the nation: that there's no economic growth taking place, that there's no hope for the future, that it's all going to come to a crashing halt any minute now. Well, the fact is we're a huge country, and this is one of my favorite ways to show this. This is a map of state GDPs compared to national GDPs around the world. It's kind of startling that Texas has the same sized economy as Russia. It probably has as many nukes. Then you look at California, it has the same sized economy as Italy, and somehow that figures. So we're really a nation of nations. I mean, all by ourselves, we account for a vast percentage of the U.S. GDP globally. I mean, the U.S. is the largest economy in the world. We have an economy of $16 trillion. A lot of conversation about China catching up at some point or surpassing us at some point. It's going to be a while. China has a GDP of about 12 trillion. So they've got a ways to go, and they're not growing any faster than we are right now. And we'll come back to China off and on, but just as an example of how we can get skewed data. We look at China, we see that they're growing at 7%, 7.5%. We're like, wow, that's really fast. Boy, we're only growing at 1.5%. They're growing a lot faster than we are. Here's the problem. In China, 6% growth is recession. This is a country that needs to generate 1,300,000 jobs per month just to keep up with population growth. If they fall below 6%, they're in recession. So their 6% is our 0. So if they're growing at 7.5, that's 1.5% growth. We're growing at 1.5. We're literally growing at the same rate. The two countries are paralleling in terms of their own economic development. And China is facing the challenge of being on top for a while. This was the major manufacturing nation globally for consumer goods because it was the low-cost producer. Those of you in business know what happens to low-cost producers. Who are you vulnerable to? The next low-cost producer. If you're producing on the basis of price, you're vulnerable to that next competitor. That's what's happening to China. I was in a Chinese hotel a few months ago, one of these mammoth business hotels that has a lobby that's like 12 times the size of Edwardsville. I mean, it's just huge. And I can see this commotion going on at one end of the lobby, but I can't really see what's happening until it gets closer. And it turns out that there's 4 or 5 guys in suits that are being chased out of the lobby by Chinese police. And what essentially was happening is they were flinging business cards at people's tables as they were running by. And they were Vietnamese. And they were saying, "You doing business in China? You come Vietnam. We're better. We cheaper. We smarter." And the Chinese were like, "Get out of our hotel." So they're losing business to Vietnam. They're losing business to Indonesia. They're losing business to India. They're losing business to other countries that are doing to China what China did to the countries they replaced. That creates a dilemma. The Chinese now have to figure out a way to compete with the companies in the US and in Germany and Japan, and that's a whole different combination of skills. Mentioned again in the introduction, I'm the economist for the fabricators and manufacturers. We have a big trade show every year, and last year we were in Chicago, and this is a great opportunity to see what's happening in the manufacturing world. And setting up right across from our booth is a booth from China and a booth from Germany, and they're both selling press brakes. And the Chinese are very excited because their press brake looks exactly like the German press brake, even the same color as the German press. It's like, for God's sakes, could you just, paint it a different color? So it's a third less than the German machine, and the Chinese are waiting to clean up. 3 days, 26,000 people came through that show every single day. For 3 days, not one person in the Chinese booth. The German booth was packed. And so after a few days, the Chinese guy comes over and says, "What's going on?" And I said, "Well, ask somebody." So he goes up to this guy wearing a set of overalls, runs a little job shop in Mississippi, and he says, "Why are you not coming in my booth?" He says, "Our machine is just like the Germans." It's like they're now admitting that they completely copied it. And he goes, "Son, how long you been in business?" He says, "I'm a job shop. I don't got marketing. I don't got ads. I don't got nothing. I got my reputation. When somebody orders a part from me, that part shows up exactly when I say it's going to. Because if it doesn't, they're going to go to the next job shop. I mean, we're all the same. We're just making stuff out of sheet metal." German machines, by this time, Dieter has walked up. He says, "Dieter, how long you been making that machine?" "We have been making this machine for 115 years." And it's like, and he just says, the German machine never, ever, ever, ever breaks down. Never at all. When you're around for 100 years, come back and talk to me. I'm not going to invest the life of my company into a machine I don't know. And that's the challenge the Chinese have. Even if it's the equivalent of the German machine, they don't have the reputation. They don't have the reputation we have. They don't have the reputation Japan has. They don't have the reputation that Germany has. And that will be one of their challenges going forward. These are the issues, apparently, that voters are most concerned about according to polls. Top of the list, not surprisingly, is employment. And then after that, there's some fluctuation week to week. But you get two things like threat of recession in 2013, economic uncertainty, both of those kind of wrapped around the fiscal cliff thing. Then you've got the debt issues, and sometimes that's a real concern, sometimes it falls back a little bit, kind of depends on what people's mood is. Then you end up with things like consumer confidence, trying to figure out what the consumer is thinking. And we're kind of going into a period right now where all of us can play economists because we can watch what the consumers do in the next 2 or 3 months. This is the time of year. Step one was back to school sales. These went off pretty well, much better than last year, kind of comparable to where they've been in the past. Very different from back to school in my day. I mean, I'm looking at a bunch of grade school kids all standing out there with laptops, and I'm like, really? I had to buy a protractor every year. Never learned how to use one, never knew what they were for, but not too many years ago, I opened up a drawer and I had like 20 of them, and they're all different colors, and it's like, hey, so if there's ever a protractor shortage, I'm ready. But it was a good season. Now we're coming into Halloween. Halloween is the second largest spending holiday in the U.S. calendar. The average person spends $350 on Halloween. If you are not one of those people, look to your left, look to your right. One of those people has the inflatable in their front yard. So it is estimated that at the end of this month, on October 31st, 1,700,000